Hey, deserving listeners, 90 Day Fiancé. Let's watch.
They're so freaking annoying, I swear.
What's your deal?
Like, I went over there to do the freaking baby registry, and then they start giving me advice, yet again, about you. And like, oh, you shouldn't have done this, you shouldn't have done that.
So I think another element that I haven't talked about yet, but I've been thinking about, is that Elizabeth, or Libby as they call her, has been triangulating a lot, dysfunctionally triangulating a lot in this family, I think. And then later on being confused when things blow up in her face. She went to her sisters to talk about the registry for the wedding, I believe, or a baby shower, and she started to complain about Andrei. She started to complain about his job prospects and that Andrei is too prideful and he won't get a job with dad and all these kinds of things. And the sisters have heard this before. This is not the first time. They've heard Elizabeth talk poorly about Andrei for months, if not years, and they have a lot of thoughts about that. They didn't like that Andrei was against her having a bachelorette party. They didn't like that he thought he was in total control of everything. And they haven't liked the way he's approached his career. Why? Well, because they care about Elizabeth, and Elizabeth has been telling them a lot of negative things about him. And then when they get riled up, the sisters, and start attacking Andrei and saying, he needs to do this, he needs to do that, then Elizabeth now starts to go, whoa, 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 I've created a monster, calm down, stop giving me advice, you need to be nice to Andrei. I didn't show that clip, but she's saying, you've been mean to him from the beginning, all these kinds of things. And that, it's probably partly true. They did seem to be at least suspicious of him, as often is the case on the show, I think unfairly. But then Elizabeth, started a fire. She, fanned the flames to get it really going. And now she's really upset that her family are upset. But they're mainly upset because you've been feeding them so much fuel for their suspicion and anger towards Andrei. If you hadn't done that, then I'm guessing that their sentiments and their feelings would be different.
And how unsupportive they were, and they still are of him. So he's not just going to be fake and smile and act like everything is great when it's not.
You're not starting the day like this, okay? I'm over this. This is a lot.
You're over it?
Yeah, because I'm having issues
I'm
now.
enraged because I had to defend your ass.
So now she is triangulating in the other way that she often does, where she will complain to her husband about her family. So she complains to her family about Andrei, and she complains to Andrei about her family. And then she's surprised when Andrei and her family aren't getting along. Some of y'all might experience this. You might now or in the past have used your friends or a family member or someone else as your primary dumping ground for all your venting of your feelings. And then years down the line, you're like, whoa, they hate each other. Maybe I had something to do with that because all I did was say negative things to this person about this other person. When I had a more well-rounded point of view about this person. I loved, I think Elizabeth loves her family. I think Elizabeth loves Andrei. But she doesn't talk about the nice feelings with her family about Andrei. She doesn't talk with Andrei about her nice feelings about her family. She only talks about the negative side. At least on camera, who knows what's going on behind the scenes. So why do people do this? Well, because they are upset. They want support, which is totally fine. But the problem is when you don't have any differentiation, meaning that you are just in an unbridled sense of discomfort and tension, and there's no path to making things better, then the triangulated person in will often really retain a lot of that negativity. So, for example, right now, Elizabeth she just was talking with her sisters, and she is really upset, which is fine, and she wants to vent about that, which is fine. She wants Andrei to listen, and he is for the most part. But then he's like, I don't want to start, I guess he's not really listening. He's saying, I don't want to start the day like this today, and I don't want to get into it. Primarily, I think because Andrei has a lot of negative feelings about the family as well. I think a lot of that has to do with the way that Elizabeth talks about the family. But anyway, so now Andrei is he's stuck in a position where on one hand, if he kind of goes along with what Elizabeth wants, which is to really attack the family, then he's going to get upset and it's going to jeopardize his relationship with the family, which he has to deal with because they are the in-laws. Or he can either say, I don't want to get involved. I don't want to hear this kind of stuff. I've been in this. I've heard you say this stuff before. I've said all the things I want to say. I don't. So it's sort of a catch-22 where he can't win either way. Now, a more differentiated place for him to be, a third option, which they don't usually exhibit for this couple, would be, honey, I hear you. You're frustrated with your sisters, and it sounds like they didn't treat you really, really well, and I'm really, really sad about that, and it upsets me that you're upset at your family and that they upset you. So more kind of supportive statements, but in your mind, if you're in Andrei's position, you want to stay out of it as best you can because you have to deal with those people and the relationship is already bad. And so you just don't want to get emotionally involved. You're with your spouse, you're hearing it, but you're not getting viscerally involved in it. But it's almost as if Elizabeth wants Andrei to get viscerally involved. I wonder what issues are in her past that result in her almost wanting people to not like each other. Because I didn't show all the clips because I didn't have much to say, but Elizabeth really talks badly about Andrei to her family. I mean, the kinds of things that she says, I'm sure she knows are going to trigger them, particularly because the conversations are so ongoing. So if she doesn't want them hating each other, why does she do that? Well, usually it's an unconscious reason. I don't know if I can even hypothesize as to why that would be, but I'm going to keep that in mind as we watch.
I don't give a like, bitch.
You should give
like, bitch, I don't give a already.
You should.
Just
Maybe you should have a better relationship with them and talk to them more.
I'm not gonna
And, like, you
excuse
guys
myself
always
in
have a
front
bad
of them.
relationship.
Like, how
just
many
figure
times do
it
I
out.
have to tell you? I'm not gonna excuse.
So now they're fighting between the two of them. So she got in the car and she was upset at her sisters. And she is upset and she wants to vent about it. He sort of shut her down, which probably wasn't a good move. He probably could have listened more. And she is now fighting with him, which is a really common thing. That is a very unfortunate event for couples that I see a lot of times in my office, where someone will be in a fight with their family of origin or at work or something, and they don't really know how to deal with those feelings, or the spouse doesn't know how to listen very well, and then the two in the relationship really are fighting a lot as well. And then it's just sad because they don't have anything to fight about right now. It's between Elizabeth and her sisters, but somehow the tension and anxiety has moved between Elizabeth and her sisters and Elizabeth and Andrei.
I don't want to live in stress, especially when there's a child coming.
Great. Now they're texting me, asking me why I just left. Like, they won't stop. Like,
You all have the same
seriously, I
mind,
told them that they
like-
need to just back up. Just back off a little bit. Just a little bit of boundaries. That's all that.
Okay, so you want boundaries, totally fine. But that starts with you, Elizabeth. If you're going to vent your complaints to your family about Andrei, then, and they get upset and respond, then you started the boundary issue. You defined the boundary. You announced to the family, the sort of boundary that we have is such that I'm going to tell you about my complaints about Andrei, or at least the ones that they show us on the TV show. So the fact that they're upset and they have feelings about it shouldn't surprise you. Now, if you don't want their advice, which it sounds like she doesn't, then maybe don't tell them about Andrei. Maybe tell a more supportive person. All y'all out there, this is probably good advice. I don't know if I've ever said this before, but you want to rattle through the people in your life. And you should at least have 3 people that are really good listeners. But you should rattle through the people in your life that you can really depend on. Someone who really listens, takes the time, you feel safe with, and really define who those people are as opposed to the other people, so that you don't just talk to anyone about your feelings. Because if you talk to people who are unsafe, if you talk to people who aren't particularly good at listening, if you talk to people who don't really prioritize you or slow down and really pay attention, then you are shooting yourself in the foot. And you want to cultivate, and if you don't have anyone in your life like this, you want to start now and cultivate that. I've worked with a lot of clients on this. It can take years. It's hard to do overnight. Sometimes it happens. It usually doesn't. But it's the sort of thing that you build over time. Some of you know my relationships with Umberto and Bob and Rebecca and others. But particularly Bob, Bob and I have been building our relationship for the past 24 years. And you will hear in our audio episodes the result of that. It's not something that we just developed overnight. And we worked at, and we got into some fights. We had some issues. We worked through it. We were humble. We apologized. We worked on it. We dedicated ourselves. We paid attention to each other. And over time, I now know that I can tell Bob anything at any point, and he will be there for me and he will listen, and vice versa. So that's something you have to build. Now, 24 years ago, I didn't know he was going to be a relationship like that with me, but I set out to develop that. I remember thinking, I bet you this guy would be a good friend, and I bet you he would be a good supportive person in my life. And I reached out to him a lot, and I told him how I felt, and I told him I wanted him to be my friend. You know, I cultivated it. And so make sure that you start that process early and often so that you can have at least 3 people that you can turn to at any moment. But anyway, so Elizabeth is upset. Now, maybe she's just really activated, and she's just really hurt, and she just needs some space to calm down. I don't know.
Leave request.
Elizabeth doesn't listen to me. I tell her, like, if she feels like that we will talk about something, but she doesn't want to, she doesn't have to go there. It's simple as that. And it affects me a lot because they're always negative. They're always just getting their nose in my stuff.
So you hear that negative. Her family are always negative, and they're always getting their nose in my stuff. I wonder if he is basing that mostly, if not entirely, or at least mostly, on Elizabeth's report to him, that she will narrativize events that happened with her family, and for him, it becomes the reality. When in more closer to reality, the family are being provoked to invade their space because Elizabeth will complain to the family about him, and then they offer advice, which people often do. I don't recommend people do that. I don't think it's a good idea. So if one of your friends is complaining about their spouse, it's a huge compulsion on the listener's part to offer advice. I don't know exactly why this is, but it is almost always a bad idea. Unsolicited advice. When, your friend comes to you, it's like, oh, my husband, he's doing this and he's doing that. There's always this compulsion of, oh, well, what if you did this? Or what if you just broke up with him? What if you got a divorce? What if you, I don't know. People always have advice. And sometimes it's helpful and sometimes it's not. So a good rule to follow is, hey, do you want advice or do you just want to vent? Just ask that question. If you have the itch to give advice, just ask that question. Hey, so do you want advice right now, or are you just looking for someone to talk to? Most people will say, I don't want advice. I'm just looking for someone to talk to. Then you know. And you can just let go of the responsibility of fixing the problem, because usually people don't want that anyway. So what Elizabeth does is she vents to her family, and then they give advice, and then Elizabeth will reject the advice and say, your advice isn't welcome. Why are you always giving me advice? And then the conflicts just go up and up and up.
Stop texting them like them. Stop texting them.
They're texting me. What do you want me to do? Just ignore
stop
them? I'm
texting
not going to let them just sit
and
there and
that's
keep
it.
talking a bunch of...
Okay, so they're both right. There's no one's wrong here. But the way they're talking to each other isn't very constructive. For her, she's like, my family is texting me, and I want to text them. Now, we could debate the wisdom of that, but it's fine. It's Elizabeth's life. And for him, he's saying, stop texting with them because you're just going to get more riled up. You just sat down in this car and telling me about what kind of jerk faces they were, and you're continuing the drama with them on the text. I recommend that you put the phone down and just stop texting with them. And this is just general advice for everyone. If you're in a fight with someone and you're trying to fight over text, it's almost never going to help. you cannot communicate effectively unless you're apologizing and unless you need time to breathe and you're going to say something really nice over text, then go ahead and do that. But I can't tell you how many times I have a couple will sit down or clients will sit down. They'll be like, I was in this huge fight. And they're telling me about the fight. And I'm like, whoa, it sounds pretty awful. It sounds almost like worse than other kinds of fights you've been in. And they give me more details. And then suddenly I realize, wait, so this whole fight was over texting? This whole fight that you had was over texting? Of course, you guys, if you guys are talking about nuanced emotional needs and complaints about each other and you're all riled up and you're flaming each other over texting, yeah, I understand now. Don't text people, call them. You need to have that voice with the inflections and the back and forth and the hearing. This is why Twitter sucks for a pretty good percentage of people, because in the amount of characters you have on Twitter, you can't really communicate what you are trying to say, and people aren't going to understand really what you're trying to say. You need to be able to use your voice and use your demeanor and watch other people's facial expressions as you're talking, so you can adjust what you're saying based on what they're saying. So anyway, he's saying, don't text. It's not a good idea. She's saying, I want to text. They're both right. I hope that the two of them just be like, I hope that Andrei's just like, hey, she's in a fight with her sisters. I'm not going to get involved. Let's see what he does.
Don't respond. Because if you're going to respond, you entertain them, all right? Don't respond, I said.
Do not.
Not okay. Why would you do that? What would be the purpose of that? Not okay. You do not grab. What are you doing? Has he done this before? What is going on right now? No, you can. So clinically what's happening is the triangulation. She sat down in the car and dumped all the anxiety onto his lap. He didn't take it very well. He lacks differentiation. A differentiated place for him would be like, okay, I'm getting kind of riled up right now because she's riled up and I need to calm down. This is not my issue. I'm not going to get involved. If she needs me to help, she'll ask me. Otherwise, I'm just going to drive and I'll let her have her thing. That's, you'll hear me talk about differentiation, and differentiation, one of the dimensions is the ability to meld with people when you want to. When the two of them are in love and they're having wonderful moments, there's a lot of overlap in their personalities. But there are other times when you need to be able to separate, and this is one of them. It's like, okay, this is not my problem. She's not mad at me. She's mad at her sisters. I'm having anxiety because I don't like her sisters either, but this isn't my problem. There's nothing I'm going to be able to do. I don't like the fact that she's all upset and riled up. I want to fix it, but I can't. There's nothing I can do. And so I need to separate from her emotionally right now. I'll stay in contact and I'll listen, but I'm not going to get involved. I'm not going to allow myself to fall down that hole that she's in right now. I'm going to stay up here. She's over there. I'm over here. She is having her feelings. I don't need to control them. That's the ability to differentiate of like, I am me, you are you. There's a boundary right here that I can use to protect both of us, really, because I need to stay calm. And if I get involved, I'm going to ruin our relationship. But that's not what he did. What he did was, I don't like the fact that you're texting your family because it's just causing more drama and it's stressing me out to watch that happen. So I'm going to forcefully, physically make that stop. What are you thinking? Is this, what's going on? It's just not a good development in their relationship.
Grab my phone out of my hand.
Get off.
Give me it now.
No, you're not going to get a phone.
Give
Don't
me
text
it now.
Don't text.
Give me my phone right now.
If you promise you're not going to text him.
No. Give me my phone.
So kudos to Elizabeth for standing up to him and saying, this is not going to work. I'm not going to reward this. I'm not going to stand for this. I'm not going to get physical. Hopefully she doesn't get physical. Use your words and you say, this isn't going to work. Now, another tactic would be, honey, I see you're not going to give me my phone back. This is not the end of this. And then you wait for him to calm down because I think he's riled up and you're riled up. And then you sit him down and you say, okay, what happened in the car? Unacceptable. Never is it going to happen again. You need to understand that, you don't necessarily, this is another principle of good conflict management is it's rare that you have to resolve or even talk about the conflict right now. You can absolutely give it a couple hours and talk about it later. You don't need to talk about it in the moment. Now, it could be argued that if Elizabeth backs down, she's rewarding his controlling, semi-abusive act in that moment. So now hopefully she won't get physical, and hopefully he'll say, okay, fine, here's your phone back. And hopefully he'll learn from his mistake and never do something like this again. The worry I have is that this is escalating, because a behavior like that is sometimes the beginning of the lower rung of the ladder, and abusive behavior can progress and get worse. I don't know. He's had other minor signs of an abusive attitude of my way or the highway. It's always, men are always the head of the household. Men are always in control, and you can't, do what you want. He would shame her for having a bachelorette party, which is another thing that abusive people will do sometimes. So maybe there are a few signs there. I don't know. What do you think? Comment below.
Don't text them. Tell them to
Get
get out
my
from my
phone
life. That's
right
it.
now.
Tell them to get
Andrei,
off. Listen,
hand me my phone.
here's your phone. Tell
Do
them
not
to get
ever
off our
snatch
life.
anything
That's
out of
it.
my hand ever again.
No,
you
I
need to
paid
be
for it.
here for me and listen and let me vent. You don't need
But
to
you
be
don't
angry
listen.
as well.
You don't.
Okay, so good-ish. She is identifying her needs, which I think is true. I've been saying that from the beginning. I need you to be here for me when I'm upset and listen. I don't need you to get angry as well. Okay, yes, but Elizabeth, you have been fanning the flames with Andrei for a long time. You have been venting to him for a long time and feeding his fuel that he already kind of had a little bit of regarding his anger and disdain for your family. But yes, that is a good request there. That's one of the healthiest things that they've said in this conversation. It was done in an angry fashion, but I'm glad that she identified that. I want you to listen to me vent, and I don't want you to get upset. What's going on here? So, it's valid.
I literally saw a side of him that was not okay. I didn't like it. It was very, very poor behavior.
Tell them to get off our life, and that's it. We're all coming down now,
Freaking child is going to be born into a negative
Don't even
environment.
Don't even
Seriously.
say that.
So he had kind of a motion with his arm, which is concerning. Maybe I'm reading into something because I'm looking for it. I don't know, but let's rewind that and watch his arm. That's a worrisome thing.
It was very, very poor behavior.
Tell them to get off our life, and that's it. We're all coming down now,
Freaking child is going to be born into a negative
Don't even
environment.
Don't even
Seriously.
say that.
But look at how everybody is acting. It's ridiculous.
So I'm starting to piece a lot of things together. He said once when she was upset at him at the baby clothing store about the truck driving thing, and he was pacing back and forth really fast, and he was saying, I need you to shut up, I need you to stop talking, or, I'm getting really angry. So are we starting to see a problem here? Is it an anger problem? Is it a socialized masculinity thing of it's okay for men to strike and control women? Is it both? I don't know. I really hope it's neither. All right, well, that does for that episode. Everyone out there, please take care of yourself because you deserve it. You really, really do.